whisper from the red carpet in Shanghai has turned into a roar across Hollywood, but the story behind the scenes is far more complex than a simple fashion statement. The global entertainment industry is currently reeling from an unexpected development involving one of its most iconic figures. When stepped out in Shanghai for a high-profile fashion event this past March, the public reaction was instantaneous and, for many, deeply polarized. While the digital landscape became flooded with wild, unsubstantiated theories regarding her appearance, theories that often rely on invasive speculation about cosmetic choices, the reality of the situation is significantly more profound. What many perceived as a shocking public transformation was, in truth, the latest tactical movement in a carefully orchestrated, decade-long exit strategy. For years, the public has viewed her through the lens of a classic movie star, but the narrative is shifting beneath our feet. This was not a desperate attempt to capture past glory. It was a deliberate, calculated step toward a life that exists entirely outside the traditional constraints of the American film machine. We are looking at a woman who is not just changing her look, but systematically dismantling the infrastructure of her public life to secure a future of complete autonomy. As we peel back the layers of this story, we find that the shock was never about the clothes or the face. It was about the realization that one of the world's most famous people is finally and successfully walking away from the spotlight for good. The transition is, and it is happening with a precision that suggests she has been planning this release from the industry for years, waiting only for the final bureaucratic threads to be cut so she can vanish into a life of her own choosing. What appeared to be a standard industry appearance was, in reality, a masterful display of rebranding that signaled the end of an era. When those images from the Tom Ford event in Shanghai hit the wires, the internet's response was a masterclass in reactionary gossip. The dialogue quickly devolved into aggressive scrutiny of her physical presentation, with various forums and tabloid columns churning out endless debates about what might have been altered or adjusted. However, from an investigative standpoint, focusing on these minute physical details is a distraction, a classic misdirection that keeps the public chasing ghosts, while the real objective remains hidden in plain sight. This appearance was designed to project a new, minimalist, and highly controlled persona. By leaning into the aesthetic of her own sustainable brand, Atelier, she successfully shifted the conversation from her status as an actress to her status as a creator and a brand architect. This was a transition from being a product of the Hollywood system to being the one in control of the design. The unrecognizable critiques that flooded social media were ironically proof that her strategy was working. She had successfully decoupled her identity from the character the public expected her to play. She was no longer performing, she was operating. This shift is critical because it highlights a woman who is no longer interested in being the it girl or the tabloid fixture. She has embraced a form of high-level rebranding that prioritizes artistic autonomy over the standard expectations of celebrity maintenance. By controlling the narrative through style, she effectively silenced the standard industry critiques that had pursued her for 20 years. This wasn't about looking a certain way. It was about defining her image on her own terms, a move that signals she is to exit the stage as a performer and enter the next phase of her life as an independent entity, free from the superficial demands that defined her earlier career. For years, legal and family obligations kept her anchored to Los Angeles, but a countdown that began long ago is finally reaching zero. The most significant detail regarding her departure from the limelight is not found on a red carpet, but in a legal calendar. For nearly a decade, its movements have been heavily dictated by custody arrangements and the intense, often grueling, legal friction surrounding her family life. These issues acted as a tether, forcing her to remain within the orbit of the Southern California entertainment hub, regardless of her personal desires to relocate. However, we are now witnessing the expiration of that tether. With her youngest children and reaching the age of majority this coming July, the legal requirement that forced her to remain in the Los Angeles area is effectively vanishing. This is not mere speculation. It is the reality of the timeline she has been managing. She has spent years navigating a system that demanded her presence, often at great personal cost and under the constant threat of public exposure. The upcoming milestone represents a total liberation. She has been biding her time, fulfilling her responsibilities, and her children had stability before making her move. Now that this window is closing, she is finally free to reclaim her mobility. This shift in her life's architecture is massive. It means she is no longer subject to the geographic demands of her past. She can choose to live wherever she finds peace, and her choices, based on long-standing connections and property holdings, point clearly toward international relocation. This move will fundamentally change her relationship with the public, as the proximity that allowed for constant, invasive media coverage will be permanently severed. By leaving the geographic heart of the industry, she is choosing to prioritize her own mental health and her children's privacy over the relentless cycle of domestic drama that has plagued her for years. Her multi-million-dollar estate is being cleared, and the speed of the sale tells us everything we need to know about her urgency to leave. The physical evidence of her exit is undeniable and currently sitting on the luxury real estate market. The listing of her $24.5 million Los Angeles residence is not a lateral move or a downsize. It is a full-scale abandonment of her primary base of operations. In the world of high-end property, putting a long-term home on the market is the clearest possible signal of a lifestyle shift. She is not moving to another neighborhood. She is to leave the city entirely. This mansion has served as a bunker for her during the most turbulent years of her life, a place where she had to balance the demands of being a global icon with the struggles of her private life. By selling this property, she is washing her hands of the geographic of the industry. This is a move of finality. Sources indicate the estate is being shown to pre-qualified, high-net-worth buyers, and the pace of this process suggests she wants to be untethered by the end of the year. This action is a clear message to the industry. She is done playing the role of the Hollywood resident. She is shedding the excess, liquidating the symbols of her past, and for a future that does not involve commuting to studio lots or navigating the social circles that keep the Hollywood machine turning. This is a tactical withdrawal. She has realized that as long as she owns a significant footprint in Los Angeles, she remains vulnerable to the pressures and the scrutiny of the industry. By cutting this tie, she is signaling that her future is elsewhere, likely in the landscapes of France or the terrain of Cambodia, places where she has built deep personal connections that have nothing to do with her box office appeal or her standing in the SAG-AFTRA hierarchy. She isn't quitting work, but she is fundamentally changing what it means to be a professional in a world that only wants her as a star. Her latest film project, Couture, is the final piece of the puzzle, acting as a functional bridge between her past as a performer and her future as a private entrepreneur. It is no coincidence that the film focuses on the world of fashion, an industry she is currently attempting to dominate with her own brand, Atelier. This project allows her to maintain a professional foothold while simultaneously transitioning away from the traditional acting roles that once defined her. By involving herself in projects that align with her humanitarian and creative goals, she is effectively professionalizing her exit. She is not disappearing into obscurity. She is moving into a different tier of influence, where the metrics of success are no longer tied to opening weekend numbers or tabloid column inches. Atelier is the centerpiece of this transformation. It represents a pivot towards sustainable craftsmanship, global advocacy, and ethical production, all areas where she can wield power without having to sacrifice her privacy. She is leveraging her massive global brand to build something that exists independently of the studios. This is incredibly smart. She is taking the massive capital and the massive audience she earned through her film career and investing them into a new, self-governing identity. The actress is slowly being phased out, replaced by the global creator. This project, Couture, proves that she can still work on things that interest her, but she will do so on her own schedule, in her own locations, and with the creative control that was never granted to her as a contract player. She has reclaimed her agency, that her professional life serves her personal peace rather than the other way around. Decades of invasive scrutiny and complex legal battles have pushed her to a breaking point, and she is finally reclaiming her peace. If you look back at the last 10 years, the story of her life has been overshadowed by unrelenting legal struggles. The constant, intrusive, and often public nature of her family conflicts has forced her to live in a state of perpetual. She has spent years fighting to protect her internal communications, her parenting decisions, and her private life from being litigated in the court of public opinion. This constant pressure is precisely why she is now moving with such intensity. She has seen firsthand the toxicity that comes with being a central figure in the Hollywood ecosystem. The relentless nature of the scrutiny, the way the industry and the media feed off the private difficulties of stars, has clearly taken its toll. Walking away is not merely a lifestyle choice, it is a form of survival. She is shielding herself and her family from a system that lacks boundaries and a public that has become accustomed to treating her life as a public domain product. The accusations that surfaced during her legal battles were often sensationalized, leading to a climate where she had to remain hypervigilant at all times. By choosing to relocate and significantly scale back her public exposure, she is creating a sanctuary. She is putting a hard limit on how much of her life is available for consumption. This is a powerful reclamation of her dignity. She is choosing a future where her character is no longer subject to the whims of biased reporting or the malicious gossip that has surrounded her for so long. The piece she is not just about a change of scenery. It is about the fundamental right to exist without being viewed as a constant character in a tragic story written by others. The world is asking if she is finished, but perhaps the real question is why we ever expected her to stay in a system that offered so little in return. We have reached the conclusion of a story that has spanned decades. The transition we are seeing, from the red carpet in Shanghai to the sale of her home, is the final act of a long-term strategy to liberate herself. Whether she continues to act in sporadic, prestige projects or leaves the screen entirely matters less than the broader, more significant fact that she is no longer a resident of the Hollywood machine. She has successfully navigated the most difficult period of her life and is now positioning herself for a future that is entirely of her own design. This is a rare victory in an industry that usually demands total consumption of its stars. Most individuals in her position are never able to fully detach. They remain caught in the cycle of fame, forever chasing the next project to maintain their relevance. However, is proving that it is possible to treat fame as a resource rather than a prison. She is using her status to build a life of independence and humanitarian focus. As we watch her move toward this new chapter, we should recognize that we are not witnessing a retirement, we are witnessing an escape. She is walking away from a life that demanded she be everything to everyone, and she is choosing, for the first time, to be something entirely for herself. The question is no longer what happened in Shanghai. The question is how she managed to survive the machine long enough to finally secure her freedom. As she departs, she leaves behind a landscape that will continue to gossip about her, but she will no longer be there to hear it. She is finally, truly moving on.